to Our Time. I'm your host, Aksa Khan, and today I'm joined by Lexi Walker and Professor Jeff Segal to talk about the Supreme Court. Thank you both for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let's jump into it. So my first question for you guys, now that Brett Kavanaugh has joined the court, how does this change things going forward?
Justice Kavanaugh replaced Justice Kennedy, who was often called the swing justice on the court. So there is now, so he would vote, Kennedy would vote conservatively on economic things, but he was a liberal on social issues such as abortion and affirmative action and same-sex marriage. Most of those decisions were 5-4 decisions. So with Kavanaugh replacing Kennedy, there is no longer a majority for affirmative action or same-sex marriage, or there will be a whole host of things where the court will move to the more conservative side.
So along those same lines, now that the U.S. does have a very conservative court, what does that mean for the liberal side of the court? Does their vote just not matter anymore?
They can file dissents, and if the Supreme Court, say, were to reverse itself on same-sex marriage, that wouldn't, or abortion rights, that wouldn't mean that same-sex marriage would be illegal. It just means it would be up, or abortion would be illegal. It just means it would be up to each individual state to decide.
So our generation is obviously a little more liberal than previous generations. Do you think that the political landscape of this country, as we get older and these decisions start to affect us more, having a more conservative court, how is that going to affect us?
Okay, one way I would say it would affect us is being that the hearing that was held with Kavanaugh was mainly about sexual assault, and combining it with the whole Me Too movement. I feel like with our generation, we're gonna have to step it up a notch, I would say, because being that the victim, what's her name, Ford, right?
Dr.
Yes,
Ford.
Dr. Ford, being that she was brave enough to step out, but she wasn't heard. So I feel like it's up to our generation to make that extra step that needs to be taken. So we're gonna speak up and we're going to be heard. So I think that's like this generation is getting braver and more like willing to be actually a part of like the whole political system and stuff that's going on right now, because it's literally affecting our daily lives. And I feel like what's helping us to improve as well is honestly social media has a big part of it, because majority of the time you're on the phone, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, just scrolling. And now that these things are affecting our, as I said before, our everyday life, we're gonna see it and we're gonna want to do something about it, So that's how I feel one way is changing.
Let me add to that point about the social media in particular. If there were a young Brett Kavanaugh today, all of his drunken escapades would be captured by someone's iPhone, and he could deny it, and then they'd show it. Oh, but here, was this you? And so things are going to be very different. It's going to be much more difficult to say these things never happened if, in fact, they did.
So along those same lines, how do you think social media affected how we viewed the hearings themselves?
I don't know that it affected it very much. The fact that it was on live TV and millions of Americans were watching, I don't know how social media, Facebook or anything, had much impact on this.
So do you think our opinions would change depending on if we had social media versus if we didn't?
Well, social media does have an impact, but I think most people listen to the side that they believe. People don't, people on the left aren't, getting Fox News feeds, and people on the right are not getting MSNBC feeds. So it mostly creates little bubbles for us to live in where we all hear what we want to hear.
I completely agree, because you have hashtags that's for Kavanaugh and against Kavanaugh. And depending on what side you're on, and I am voting on the side of not having Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court, because as again leading back to the whole sexual assault, victims that's out there, living their everyday lives and seeing Ford not winning against Kavanaugh, that was really upsetting for many people. So I believe that social media was a platform to help them be heard more, especially for like the protesters that was on the street, and many of them got arrested. I even saw a protester that was in a wheelchair, like a female. She was in wheelchair and she got arrested. Like I just think it's just ridiculous. So social media could play against either side and help to boost up whatever side that you're rooting for.
So I agree, and one of the things that I've seen on social media is a lot of criticism of Brett Kavanaugh's attitude during the hearings. Do you think that the standards for these hearings will change, and the standards for who we pick to be our justices will change because of this?
No, I don't. Particularly because the Republicans got rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations. So if we had this nomination and the Democrats were able to filibuster, it would take 60 votes to to end debate. He never would have gotten through, and the White House might have withdrawn it. And they might have picked a more moderate person to begin with, but without any ability to filibuster, the president can pick more extreme nominees. So I think it's just going to get worse.
Do you think that the biases, so obviously there's conservative and liberal, but as we discussed earlier, we want to try to be as unbiased as possible. Do you think that the biases of these justices should be known?
Yes, I do. Everyone, you watch these confirmation hearings, and they all say, I just follow what the Constitution says. Well, the Constitution doesn't give answers to. Last year, the Supreme Court decided whether the police needed a warrant to track someone's whereabouts by cell phone pings for 127 days. Well, there's nothing in the Constitution that gives an answer to that. You can have your hunches about whether this is acceptable or not, but the Constitution does not speak to the justices.
Do you think that our political landscape will become more and more polarized as time goes on?
Yes.
What do you think would be the breaking point?
Well, we came very close on this hearing in that we had one Republican who voted against Kavanaugh and one Democrat who voted for him. We've never had a situation where the vote in the Senate was completely along party lines. It is also the case that since Justice Stevens' retirement, that every Republican on the Supreme Court is more conservative than every Democrat.
How would this materialize, especially with the upcoming midterm elections coming up? If there is a political reckoning to be had, how would this materialize?
Well, one thing that we're going to see is that the Democrats will gain seats in the House, but they'll probably lose seats in the Senate. Senator Heitkamp from South or North Dakota is going to lose her seat in part because she voted against Kavanaugh. Senator Manchin, even though he voted for Kavanaugh, is going to be in trouble in West Virginia. I don't think he'll lose his seat, but it's going to be a tough race for him.
We'll definitely see a lot of changes.
Yes.
So we have 1 minute left, so I'd like to ask one last question. Brett Kavanaugh's outbursts, were they okay? How do we feel about that?
You wanna?
Actually, just before this interview, I watched a video of him during the trial, and I actually think it was just completely inappropriate, because to me, when someone is lying, they're gonna especially be like very dramatic. Like I felt like that was uncalled for, because the person that was the victim, Dr. Ford, was not acting in that type of manner. So why should you, even if you're proving your innocence, there's a way to act professionally, especially because you're doing a hearing with the Senate. So I didn't feel like that was called for.
Well, Kavanaugh had given an interview on Fox News a day or two before, and he was very calm and stoic, and President Trump told him he had to, be more aggressive, and he listened to Trump, and he came out fighting.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. This has been very enlightening. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome.